Lindell Fields will serve out the remaining year and 3 months of former State Superintendent Ryan Walters' term. There is an active race still to take the reins of the Department of Education starting in January 2027. Throwing his hat in the ring today is Senate Education Committee Chairman Republican Adam Pugh, who stopped by to speak unedited about his candidacy. Back on the program to speak unedited after a big announcement is Senate Education Chairman Adam Pugh. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
When I had you on the program, I think about 2 months ago or so, you were considering, but you weren't there. What was the tipping point?
I was. I care about this a lot, Rick. I mean, I've got 3 kids in public schools, and so I'm vested, fully vested in this, and I just believe the agency needs leadership. I mean, I really mean that. I think this is not, you think about the title, you're not overseeing a school district, right? You are the executive director of an agency, and that's a different skill set. That requires leadership. It requires you to be able to walk the halls at the Capitol and work with the legislature to, enact initiatives that come from the State Department. You have to talk about funding and priorities and the appropriations process. You have to know Title 70. And that's something I've spent, now the last almost 6 years really diving into and understanding the funding formula, which is complicated. It's really complicated. And I really did. I thought about it and I talked with a lot of folks. I don't need the title. It's dad and husband. You've heard me say that many times. It's the best thing I'll ever do, and my most proud achievement for sure. But I do think this agency needs leadership, and there's an urgency here. I think it's important to note you only get 13 years in the K through 12 space when a child's going to be inside your doorways to educate that child and prepare them for whatever God has next for them, whether it be the military, college, directly into a career, starting a business, whatever it might be. We can't waste those opportunities. And if it takes several years to figure things out, that might be half of a child's educational matriculation that the adults couldn't get out of their own way and figure it out. And so with respect to that urgency, I thought it was the right time.
So, I mean, a lot of people don't feel good, even if you liked Superintendent Walters. A lot of people don't feel good where we're at. How do we accomplish, Mississippi did a miracle.
Right.
What's your plan here?
Well, the first thing is to have a plan, right? This can't be an ad hoc way of leading an organization. I mean, you have to set a vision, and you have to be able to communicate that to the people that are under your purview and work in that particular agency. I think the communication has to improve, right? There's so many times where even I felt, as the chair of education, I was left in the dark a little bit about things that were going on, or there were announcements made where it caught me off guard, and maybe it was counter to what the statute had already said. So being able to communicate to school districts, to the legislature, to stakeholders. Look, there were a lot of things where we shared the same goals, engaging parents and understanding that parents are going to make schools great. And then outside of that, you need a qualified man or woman inside of that classroom that feels properly equipped and resourced. And just being able to go back into every district and communicate that and say, hey, I'm here to listen to what you need, hold you to high standards and accountability, and educate our kids in a manner that's going to prepare them for whatever is next. And for the past 5 years as education chair and going into my 6th year now as chair of the Senate Education Committee, I've always articulated a vision. And I said, here's the agenda that we're going to work on this year. Hold us to that. Here are the things we stand for. Here's what we believe in. Here's what we want to fund in our priorities. And over time, you get other legislatures who say, oh, I'd like this to be a priority. And you build a consensus in those coalitions. And that's something I'm going to really be very intentional about working on as I work around the state and meet folks who are interested in this position and hopefully garner their vote.
Now, I have to ask, because we've spent 3 years talking about Bible in the classroom and wokeism and teachers unions. Where are you at on Bible in the classroom and those things that we seem to have been centered on for so long?
Yeah, I think we already have the ability to put Bibles in classrooms, right? I've got little kids in Edmond Public Schools, and I'm not comfortable with a 22-year-old right out of teacher prep program, turning around and talking to my kids about our faith. Right? That's a very personal decision that my wife and I made, where to take our kids, to worship and where to have communion. And so I think those things are very personal. What I want to see from that teacher is live it, right? Like live it. Be the example of what your faith has done in your life. And if a child needs a Bible as a resource, it's already can be allowed there. But to mandate it and spend $3 million when, there's even free apps, and we've talked about this a lot, right? Where there can be resources for children who want, and also we've done a lot in the school choice movement as well to allow families an opportunity if they want something apart from a secular education, if they want a faith-based education, they can have that opportunity and maybe take their kids to a school where they feel it's appropriate to talk about faith or, talk about their biblical views. And so I've been pretty consistent on that. And I think that's in step with the majority of Oklahomans who are, believers, but they think that's a very personal decision and they want to keep that inside their home and inside their church.
Superintendent Walters sat in this very chair earlier this summer. And I told him, I said, yes, Tulsa Public Schools needed a change. Yeah. There was some problems found. How heavy-handed will you be with the districts should you get this job?
I've got a record, right, already. So this is, I think people know who I am because I've already been leading the Education Committee for a number of years. There are times when things arise to the level where the state should insert or assert its authority. There's no doubt. But we have to be very careful that we operate more with a scalpel approach than a sledgehammer, because we talk a lot about believing in local control and believing in kind of a bottom-up way of governing. But when we try to solve something at the state level, it's a one-size-fits-all approach. And every school then has to abide by that regulation or by that new law. And we need to be careful because it's 500 plus school districts and the state is pretty diverse. The East is different from the West and the North is different from the South, and the urban areas are different from the rural areas. And we have to be very careful that we don't walk around just looking at everything as a nail that just needs to be hammered. There are times, I'll highlight the cell phone policy, right? I think the mental health crisis that was happening inside schools across the state and really in young people in general had risen to the level the state had to get involved. And I can't tell you the fact that I've now had so many schools and parents and teachers say, this has been amazing. Yeah. It has been, and we knew it. And we knew there was going to be some pushback about local control. But I felt like this was the right thing to do because the state did have a vested interest in making sure kids were distraction-free, that teachers felt like I could teach without, this unnecessary tool in a child's hand. And so we have to be careful, and there'll be a balance. And I think part of that balance is communicating and asking school districts, asking parents, asking advocates, what's happening in your community and how can we be helpful? Can we be a partner? Do you need a law change? Is it a resource issue? Is it a reallocation issue? We spend a lot of money in education already, and we need to really look at, is it an allocation of resources issue, not just a resources overall? So I've got a record, that I'm proud of, and I'll talk about the things that I've accomplished, and I hope, schools and parents and communities will see the work we've done more in collaboration and in partnership instead of just saying we know it all. I don't know it all, Rick. Be very clear. If someone's looking for someone to lead the department who knows it all, it is not me, to be fair. But I have a lot to learn, and I'm willing to ask questions, and I'm willing to try things. And I think I've built a lot of really good relationships with schools and parents and educators because that's the approach I've taken.
Final question, we're almost running out of time here, but we do have a teacher shortage, and there is a lot of emergency certification. How do we address that?
First off, we have to recognize it's a nationwide issue. I mean, this is not an Oklahoma unique issue. It's a nationwide workforce issue. And we have to treat teachers like professionals. We say that a lot, but then we have to ask ourselves, well, what do professionals want, right? They want opportunities. They don't want to feel like they're stuck in the same job doing the same thing for 30 or 40 years. That was a different generation's desires. It's not what this generation of teachers wants. So they need opportunities to grow and be mentored and expand their opportunities inside of the district, or maybe educational opportunities. They certainly need a pay as an incentive. But if you look at just workforce issues in general across the country, the number one reason why people leave a job, Rick, is because of their boss. It's not because of what happens at the state capitol. And in the classroom, your boss is generally your principal or your site leader. And so you'll see a focus from me on principal training and leadership training. Because again, I go back to, if you're a principal, you're an administrator, you're leading. I mean, you are leading that building. You're leading that elementary school, and you need to know how to lead people. That's a big part of your job, and creating the right culture where people want to work. And so a school district is just like a place of business. If there's a high turnover, you got to ask yourself, do I have the right people in charge? Why does everyone want to leave working here? And so I think we got to ask ourselves some hard questions about how we train and prepare our principals.
All right, Senator, we'll be watching the campaign trail.
Thank you, Rick.
Right, thank you. Keep in mind, we are posting all of our interviews with many candidates running for multiple offices on the Fox 23 YouTube page, where you can watch them in full. And we are also working on getting other candidates on this program as the 2026 election approaches. If you have not seen your preferred candidate yet, or you still want to learn about all the rest of them, stay tuned. I'm bringing them to you.